Privet and greetings from Budapest, still here in beautiful Budapest. See the central basilica here, beautiful city. So in today's video, I want to go back a little bit in time because now is day 40 of Russia's new invasion of Ukraine. And back on day 2 of the war, I evacuated from Ukraine. I was in Chernovtsi, close to the Romanian border. I've obviously since then relocated here to Budapest temporarily. And when I got to Romania, I started to see a lot of the media about how other people had managed to leave Ukraine, especially other foreigners. And there were a lot of reports of racism on the border when other foreigners were trying to leave Ukraine. So in today's video, maybe I know I'm a little bit late to the party on this one since there's been so much about it in the last 40 days, but actually I was looking online yesterday and there was a story again about it. So I thought I'd give you my experience having crossed the border and what I saw happening on the border between Ukraine and Romania, and then I'll go through some of the news reports and what I think of them and what I think was really going on. So let's get into the video. Поехали.
Tsar Experience.
So I had pre-positioned myself close to the Romanian border so I'd be able to leave quickly. And Angela and I, we went there to the border on day 2. We took a taxi to a border which is going to lead on to Suceava region in Romania. The town on the other side of the border is called Siret. And we went there, I think it was just after midday, maybe around 1 p.m. Took a taxi, and actually what we did, because there was a massive tailback, we actually just drove around it in the taxi. There was like a small side road, maybe, because it was like an 8-kilometer tailback at the border already at that time. So we got our taxi driver to drive us around, just avoid getting run over here, here in Budapest. And we came out beside a filling station right beside the actual border crossing. So we had to drive around for maybe 10 minutes on these kind of unpaved roads through a village, and we got there. So I have it actually in my vlog from when I left Ukraine, which is already 39 days ago. Crazy. So we got right up to the front, so I didn't have to wait for hours just to drive up to the front of the border. We were there already, and actually when I arrived I thought it was going to be pretty quick because there's it's hard to estimate, maybe 200 people there. I thought, well, I should be able to process this pretty quickly. It's going to be sweet. Just walk across to the other side of the border and get into Romania. Then we were waiting for a while, and the gates were closed. I should point out that Ukrainian men in general, between I think it's 18 and 60, were not allowed to leave Ukraine. So it was mainly women at the border, or there were some older men, and then there were some foreigners who could hear speaking a few languages. 1 or 2 looked like students, and I actually saw one of them on the BBC's website the following day that he wasn't actually able to get out at all. A guy who looked maybe Indian or Pakistani British. So after about an hour or so, I realized that they were basically only letting women with small children through the border. And not being a woman and not having small children, that meant we made no progress in the first hour. We were basically standing in the same place. And they were also processing people very slowly. Like there was just maybe, I don't know, 50, maybe going through an hour. I'm kind of guessing, but it was not very quick. They were not letting that many people through, and there were very few cars going through. We saw a couple in the first hour, and I realized like there are women with small children coming at more or less the same rate as they're letting people through, and that means, that explains why we're making no progress here. And I realized that my optimism about getting through the border quickly was not well placed, because now, we made zero progress in the first hour. So I decided to go up to the border guards and speak to them and see if it was possible to get through, and understand what the situation was. And the border guard, he asked me where I was from, said it was Irish. I did speak in Ukrainian, and then he said, yeah, you have to go queue there, and that's it. So same with Angela, who's Ukrainian, and I guess since racism is the theme of the video, she's Asian Ukrainian, right? So, not that that seems to have been relevant to my story in the end, but since it comes up for the theme of the video, I was starting to get quite frustrated, like no progress. Are we going to be able to get across the border? Is this such a good idea? And then the border guards that were there, they asked, who is a foreigner? And I'd say about 15 guys put their hand up, because they're all guys who are foreigners burning at the border. And it's important to note that this region, a lot of Ukrainians have dual nationality with Romania, so they could actually be Romanians, citizens, Romanian citizens, but actually also maybe Ukrainian citizens. So obviously they were trying to get out when that mightn't have been technically what they were allowed to do. But anyways, the guys, in terms of their racial appearance, there was probably 2 or 3 that looked either Black African, or they might have been Middle Eastern or Turkish or Pakistani or Indian, or the kind of main categories of foreign students that tend to be in Ukraine. The rest of them looked Caucasian. They could be Europeans, they could have been Romanians, could be Italians, could be French, could be Irish like me. So we put up our hands, and border guard said, "You will be the last people who get across the border." And I was like, okay, this is definitely not looking good now, because if foreigners get across last, and the priority is women with small children, well, I'm looking at quite a lengthy delay here, and it was starting to get a bit cold. The sun wasn't out anymore, so we started to brainstorm some new ideas, and we actually had a bit of a stroke of luck, I guess, that I'm just going to walk up to the parliament here along the river Danube that you can see out there, and Buda on the other side, on the Pest side at the moment. So basically, stroke of luck, there was a bus that was supposed to be bringing everybody to, I think they said somewhere in Italy, Trieste maybe, and got on that bus, had to pay some money just to get across. First, the bus driver didn't want to bring me onto it. He said, "No, I'm not going to Romania." I said, "Well, obviously we're going to cross the border into Romania." Then he didn't want me because I was a foreign guy. And then after some little bit of chatting, I was let on. First we went up, and then they wouldn't let the bus out because the bus driver was under 60, and they said no men can leave. So I don't know what happened, but in about an hour later, we were allowed on. We were allowed out through the border. There was 2 other foreign-looking guys on the bus with us. I'd say they might have been Middle Eastern, some sort. Just guessing, I didn't speak to them, but so there was 2 other foreign guys, and you could say for this whole controversy about whether Ukrainians were racist at the border or not, well, they were obviously darker looking. So we all got out and then made our way down. So what I personally saw on that particular border, this is just my personal experience for now, was that there definitely was discrimination against foreigners. That's what I saw, right? Basically, they said if you're a foreigner, you're going to be lost to get across, and they had a priority for women with small children. And I guess after that, it would have been if you're walking through on foot and not on a bus like we actually got out, then it would have been women without children, and then because there were supposed to be no Ukrainian men, or just maybe it was going to be women, foreign and Ukrainian, and men last. And that probably explains why the British student that I saw on the BBC the next day had not actually been able to get out, because it was going so slowly that, he never had the priority to actually be able to cross the border. Poor guy. I think I don't know if I assume he got out eventually, stay 40, but he wasn't able to get out of that border crossing. So I didn't see racial discrimination per se, because, well, they were treating me just as poorly as they were any of the Africans in terms of having the right to leave. And it was a really sucky situation. And if I hadn't found that workaround, then I might have been there for a very, very long time. Could have been there overnight, and that would have been pretty horrific, because it's obviously going to get very cold there. It's late February, and the temperatures would have dropped. It would have been very, very unpleasant. So since then, I actually got contacted by British media. I wanted to share my experience, and anyways, in the end, they didn't invite me on ever to speak, but I did see a lot of articles about racism at the border. A lot of African students being interviewed saying that they were racially discriminated against because they weren't allowed to cross. So I went through a good few of them, and in general, they basically say that, well, they discriminate against foreigners, but they keep using the word race, quite a lot. But again, most of it seems to be that, yeah, they basically discriminate against foreigners, but for foreigners as a lower priority. I'll go into why I think that might have been, I'm just guessing, at the end of the video. But not actually that people were racially discriminated against, per se. There was like 2 queues they talk about, 2 lines, one for Ukrainians and one for non-Ukrainians. Well, that's obviously discrimination by citizenship, not discrimination by color or race or any other criteria. And there's also gender as well, because women with small children got priority. And this is Eastern Europe, and it's more, or Ukraine is Eastern Europe, I'm in Central Europe now. And that's kind of the way things roll. It's a lot more chivalrous, and definitely there's no idea of egalitarianism in this kind of situation. A bit like the Titanic, women, small children on the boats, men stay on and go down with the ship, I guess. So that's kind of the mentality. And maybe that wouldn't have happened in Western Europe or North America. I don't know. I probably not, I guess. But that was the way that they had prioritized things. So I just want to run you through some of the coverage that I found where I think there isn't any actual evidence provided that there was racism per se, and also one testimony where I think actually there is some testimonial evidence, at least to racism occurring. And a lot of these images are very dramatic, but since the video is about whether it was racism or not, let's get into it. So the first one is one that I actually saw on the BBC yesterday, and they followed the Twitter journey. In the sense, this Zimbabwean British student was documenting her trip, a lot of tweets, and I actually went down and looked through her tweets, and again she actually went through the same border crossing as I did, which I found very interesting. She just did it, I think it was like 3 days later than I did, and basically, even though some of it's dramatic, this guy is coming over and harassing them, but it's not very clear why when they're at the border. He seems to try and get them to move the car they've been traveling in to go to the car park, and it's not very clear. Isn't any evidence of racism per se. She writes things like, Ukrainians didn't have to queue with us. They were prioritized and taken to the front of border control. Our queue only had non-Ukrainians, i.e. foreigners, who stood there, who stood where was decided by the military. And yeah, she actually then writes later on, because I'm looking at it, on day 40, or last night was day 39. And in fact, she had a really bad experience getting back into the UK afterwards with, I think it was her husband, who was also black, but not a British citizen, and they really made his life hell getting back in. It seemed like she had more problems getting back into the UK and been mistreated than actually she had at the border. But there you see, again, it's about being Ukrainian or not Ukrainian, and not necessarily about being black or white, because obviously your Irish boy here doesn't pass for a black guy on any measurement. There couldn't be more the antithesis. And yeah, I faced the same issues on that exact border going into Romania. Now, let me take another set of interviews that I found.
Abira Ahmad Khan was studying medicine in Kyiv when she tried to evacuate. She says border officials held her and other international students back.
They waited for all the Ukrainian people to go out first and then other nationalities.
Abira, who is from Pakistan, says the people in the Ukrainian villages have been kind and given them food.
The point about Ukrainian villagers helping foreigners, at least that upbeat part of this story. But again, she says Ukrainians and non-Ukrainians. So it's not to do with racism per se, but you do have that nationality discrimination. Let's go forward a little bit.
So many of us have been horrified by images of black students in Ukraine trying to flee war, and instead being met by racism. For decades, Ukraine has courted students from Africa as part of the country's tradition of providing affordable higher education to all. Now, Ukrainian universities house more than 76,000 foreign students. That's according to the BBC, with nearly a quarter of them from Africa and more than 20,000 from India. Now, as Russia creeps across the country, thousands of these students have attempted to flee to safety only to be caught in the grips of racism.
So in this one, we have a very dramatic intro which says, "Caught in the grips of racism." And we have the video clip where they say they're not letting the black girl on, they're letting the white girl on. But is that really what's happening? Is it because they're black and white, or is it because, well, they're guessing that the black girl is not Ukrainian, or they know she's not Ukrainian, and that's actually what's causing the issue. Let's see. I think it's later in the interview.
They called the police on us and told us to get out of the train. And we asked them why. They said the training is mostly for Ukrainians. Okay, when we got down, we didn't see them checking passport because we know there are some black people with Ukraine passport. They were selecting only white people. They were not checking passport. Then we started protesting again.
So here we have a testimonial that is a lot more convincing in terms of its content, where he says that basically they were not checking the people's passports. They were making the assumption about whether they were Ukrainian or not based on the color of people's skin. And that if you were white, they were just making the assumption you were Ukrainian. Now, this is on the Polish border. It's not where I went across, where obviously I got treated exactly the same by being a foreigner. But here, definitely we have testimonial evidence, of anecdotal evidence at least, that actually they were choosing who would get on the train and who would not be on the train based on their race, their skin color. So this is a lot more compelling than, I had to wade through so much video evidence or articles to actually find something that at least started to make some sense about racism, but this is a lot more convincing.
Finally, we got the train in the night and got to a city that has border with Poland, which is called Lviv. Then in the Lviv, most of the trains are going to Poland.
So there, actually, the first time he was on his way from Kiev to the border in Poland.
They refused the African women again, and there were several African women, pregnant African women, those with children. They were telling us that this is mostly for Ukraine, and we said, no, these women must move because they cannot be in this cold. We struggled for hours before they could allow these women to go. Now, women knew that we cannot get into the train with threats to the border.
Wow, that's a pretty incredible story, right? I mean, he had to actually walk because there were men. So eventually they got the black women, the African women, allowed onto the train to leave Ukraine and go across the border. But they were not, because there were men. As again, as I said, it's actually gender discrimination. If you want to talk about it, which is, that's the way Ukraine, Russia, and Eastern Europe operates. It's kind of more with the chivalry mindset and Titanic again. So they then had to track all the way to the border. This is a pretty epic and horrific story so far. So let's see what happened on the border.
When we got to the border, there was a barricade 30 minutes to the border. They separated us. They separated us. They said the white people should go to the other side, then the non-white people should go to the other side. So many people have slept there for 3 days, 2 days. They were allowing only white people. They will allow like 100 white people, and they allow like 2 black people or non-Asians. We started shouting and protesting. We protested for 3 days before they could allow us to move.
So God, the poor guy had been there for 3 days. They made wait because they were in 2 separate queues. He says one for white people and one for non-whites. That's clearly racist.
They didn't allow us to move. We pushed in and protested. We have to push through. Then one of the soldiers spoke to us. That was in the morning, and told us that if we break the barricade, that he's going to shoot us. We told him that we are students. We are not illegal immigrants. We pay our school fees. We have our resident card. You have to allow us to move. They didn't care. One of them got into a bus that was parked there. He drove back and was coming down with speed. He wanted to run into us. We didn't budge. We raised our hands up and started shouting that if they kill us here, they would never go free.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. So then they basically get frustrated having to wait for so long. Pretty understandable. If you've been out rough in the cold for several days, and when they try to push through the barrier at the border, they are confronted by a border guard and a gun and threatening them. He has that on camera. And then he also says that one of the other border guards started to threaten them by driving extremely fast at them. So yeah, definitely I guess the racism comes from the fact that they were made to wait for so long at the border. And I'm just here outside the beautiful Hungarian parliament. So that's where the racism comes into play. And then because of the frustration and trying to break through the barrier, they get threatened by a gun, which seems excessive. If to be threatened that you're going to be shot if you're unarmed and you're at a border crossing and you're not, you have a legal right to leave the country. It's not like they don't have a right to leave. It's about the priority and the process by which that they are trying to do so legally, and they are being prevented because of a racist selection procedure. That is definitely a lot more compelling than anything else I've seen. It wasn't my personal experience from having seen myself because I was at another border crossing, but this at least starts to look like racism.
Then one of them called for backup, which is the police. The police came and cocked gun again in front of us and was insulting us, telling us that we have to stay here. We told them, no, we cannot stay here. We have been here and you've been moving the white people away. What do you mean that we have to stay here? That was how we protested before we broke the barricade. Then we got to the border. That was the second discrimination among us. When we got to the border, they told us that the border was closed. We said, okay, we saw people that have slept there for 3 days. That's the border. It's not even the other place that we passed. And we asked them why. They said they have been passing white people. They are not allowing them. Then we said, okay, let's wait. In the morning before 12, a man on black came and told us, if you are Indian, African, or Arab, leave this place and go to the Romanian border. We told them, no, we cannot anymore. We've threatened for many days. We cannot go back. They say we have to go back. We told them we can't go back. Why are you telling us that? Why you were pushing? We were passing other Europeans that are white. You didn't even ask for passport. If you meant Indians and Africans, then check our passport. At the end of everything, they went back and negotiated and came back again and told us only women and children, which is when they started allowing women and children.
So there you see he was prevented from leaving and told to go to another border, which is a very long way away. It's going to take him, I don't know, to get to the Romanian border at least, I'd imagine 7 or 8 hours probably, maybe a little bit less. But after queuing for 3 days at the border with Poland, told to go to the border with Romania, which is where I was able to exit. So there's something going on there. Why isn't he allowed to exit into Poland? And I think that's probably one of the keys here about what's happening on a racist level.
I'm currently safe and I'm okay, even though I still need to go for hospital checkup. But I'm currently helping others that are across the border to get accommodation because we don't have enough accommodation.
So there finally he manages to get out across the border. So what the hell was going on? Well, we have a series of different experiences. So it seems to have been an issue at the Polish border and also people being able to get on trains to go to the Polish border. But not, from what I can see, an actual racial issue at the border of Romania. So what is going on there? Well, and it might actually be I'm not sure what happened at the Hungarian border. Polish government, and actually the government here, if you think back to when there was the last big refugee crisis in 2015, when people came from Syria, those two governments were particularly against people coming from the Middle East, and they cited mainly the religious background, but basically that they would integrate. And here we have a large number, or significant number, of foreign students who are from Africa, maybe the Middle East, or maybe they're Indian, and they're trying to get into Poland, where they will be able to claim the same rights as Ukrainians. So they could stay up to 3 years, I guess, in the country. And I think this is perhaps one of the reasons. There's no official declaration about why it's the case, but I find it interesting that Poland, a country that has had a policy that's against taking immigrants or refugees from the Middle East, and they have Africans, people from the Middle East, and people from like India, Pakistan, that region, coming quite considerable numbers, and it seems to be an issue getting across that border. In addition to maybe the issue with Poland, I'm just thinking, I'm processing myself, why did they discriminate against foreigners? That seems to have been universal, right? Why were foreigners the last to leave, or the lowest priority, as I was told, at the border? Well, I just think about it. There's a war, there's a Russian invasion, and you have all these people fleeing to the border, and there's a large number of foreigners who get stuck there. And, you know, Russia would definitely not have an interest, I would like to think at least, although things are around day 40 and we're seeing, you know, a lot of horrible images coming out of Ukraine, especially in the areas that have been liberated in the last couple of days. But basically that killing large numbers of foreign civilians in particular, not just civilians, but foreign civilians, would be a public relations disaster for Russia. And before the invasion happened, the West was quite hesitant about supplying Ukraine with weapons. And when the war started, they immediately started to increase that. And how were they getting the weapons across? Well, they would have been bringing them across the border somehow. Those borders could have been with Poland and Romania, because here with Hungary, at least Viktor Orban has said that they're not going to facilitate the supply of weapons into Ukraine, either as a transit country or give them themselves. So I'm just going to assume that that's not the case with Hungary, but perhaps with the other countries that's actually what was going on, and having a large number of civilians, because they're also processing things quite slowly, I thought, unusually slowly considering the crisis situation that there was. And on top of it, making the foreigners go lowest priority might have been part of the reason to that. Might have been the fact that they might have been bringing arms across the other side. I don't know. I don't have that kind of intel and access to it, unfortunately, but that's just me speculating. It's kind of one of the reasons, as opposed to just pure discrimination for the sake of discrimination, that I can think of, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's just they said Ukrainians first because Ukrainians first, and foreigners can fucking wait, basically, and black people, definitely Polish people, can wait even longer, and it sucks completely, and it's not defensible that, you know, Africans, like that guy described, had that experience, and foreigners in general. So, anyways, that's my little rambling series of anecdotes and analysis about whether there was racism on the border when people were trying to evacuate out of Ukraine with the beginning of the war. As you can see, they actually had the elections here yesterday, so I guess there's a new parliament about to be sworn in the coming days here in Hungary, and I will see you in the next video because it will actually be from Ukraine. I'm actually going to go back across the border and yeah, do a second exit, but not as an evacuee. So see you in the next video. Do побачення. До свидания. Ciao, ciao.
SAR Experience.